Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can all hear me. I've got a couple of colleagues sitting in the background that I'm sure will let me know if there's any problems and you can't hear me. I'm just going to give it another few seconds or so, another minute thereabouts to let the people that have been stuck in traffic join the webinar, and then we'll begin. Okay, so it's going to be a few more moments of silence, and then we'll start. Okay. Right, it's a couple of minutes past now, so rather than let things drag on and keep everyone on this Friday afternoon, we'll make a start. Hopefully, well, certainly you can hear me, and also hopefully you can hear me, and see me certainly. But also hopefully you'll see a PowerPoint screen that's got the subject of this afternoon's webinar on, which is 9001 back to basics. So hopefully that's what you were expecting. If not, then feel free to stay. But otherwise, you can sign up for whatever it was you thought you were expecting. So, okay, so we're going to spend the next kind of little bit of time this afternoon just talking about going really kind of back to basics with 9001. It's been a standard that's been around for an awful long time now, and it amazes me kind of even to this day how much how many questions people have got about the whole thing, how to implement it, what the questions around it, and so on and so forth. So we're going to do a little series. This is kind of set things rolling, and then what we'll do another little further series on some of the things that hopefully kind of, or subjects that may come out of this this afternoon's conversation. Okay, so back to basics then. So first of all, just a little bit about NQA. For those of you that aren't aware, there's a couple of preliminary slides that will just set the scene for you guys. So a little bit about, for those of you that don't know or aren't registered or certified with us, a little bit on the screen there about who we are, where we operate, and what we do. Okay, so I'm not going to spend vast amounts of time on this because you will get a copy of the slides to peruse at your leisure. But obviously just a couple of things flashing before your very eyes, just to give you a little idea of who we are and who's talking to you this afternoon. Okay, so although you can see me on your screen now is just me, another little bit about me. Obviously it's just about the webinar this afternoon, up to kind of 60 minutes, depending on kind of questions and engagement we have towards the end. You should on your screen have a box for asking questions. If you do feel the need, if there's anything pressing that either you want to talk about that we cover, or anything that we've not covered, I'm happy to kind of engage with that towards the end. I won't answer them as we go because it'll be a bit of a distraction, but obviously we'll do them all at the end. And if there is a common theme running through, then we'll generate another webinar based upon that subject if should the need arise. Okay, so this is being recorded. Okay, so there's a copy of this going to be made available afterwards should you want, and also a copy of the slides will come around circulated probably the early part of next week as well. Okay, so obviously that's me. My name is Martin Graham. I am the Principal Quality Assessor at NQA. Been with NQA now for just over 4 years, but overall in the certification industry for upwards of 20 now in various forms of one another in terms of certification, auditing, consultancy, and so on. So fairly well versed in the whole subject of 9001, but obviously, as with most things, there's always scope to improve and learn. That's the whole idea of the whole thing. So what we're going to be doing then, a few kind of subject matters that we're going to be talking about. Some basic stuff, but then that's, I guess, the very essence of this webinar. Okay, so what is quality? What is a quality management system? Why not just control your quality control? Why is this idea of assurance embedded within the standard as well? The intended outcomes of management system, the PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle within a quality management system, or role that can play within your 9001 system. Okay, we're going to be talking about the process approach. Okay, I know that still confuses some people, but it's actually very simple. We're going to go through the principles associated with quality, some of the key requirements, things to consider, and a little subject I called often missed or misunderstood. It's through my years of auditing, come across many things over the years that to this very day, after many 3 or 4 revisions of 9001, still cause some confusion. Certainly the 2015 version has found that it kind of elaborated that. Okay, and ultimately then about making it a system, kind of making sure your management system is giving you what you need it to be. Okay. So hopefully that's what you were expecting. So pretty basic, but then that's the whole idea of it. Okay, I think it's ever so easy to, as so many things particularly management systems, is to kind of overcomplicate, and that's what we're trying to do, is take it back a layer or two or three. Okay. So what is quality then? I'll put a question mark there, but don't feel obliged to print it in the screen. Just think about it. So what is quality then? Okay, so quality is defined within ISO as the degree to which a set of inherent characteristics of an object fulfills requirements. Okay, so I realise the irony of talking about going back to basics and then lots of kind of ISO speak coming up in these slides, but what we're going to try and do is kind of just decipher that a little bit. Okay, so I've got three other things. We're going to break that down a little bit further. So we're talking about characteristics, the object, and then requirements. Okay, so this is what your management system is intended to control. Okay, quality. Okay, so when we talk about characteristics, okay, when it comes to quality, that is a distinguishing feature. Okay, of a product or service. Okay, and a characteristic can be inherent or assigned. So inherent within a process, or assigned as part of a contractual requirement or something. And a characteristic can be qualitative. That is to say, it's kind of be something like a process or a human-related process, or it's a quantitative, as in there's numerical or physical measurement involved. So that can be a characteristic, like a characteristic of a widget that needs to measure a certain size, and so on and so forth. Or a qualitative thing can be something like the output of the success of a training course, or something like that. Something that can be measured in that sense. Okay. So various classes of characteristics, like we say, such as the following. So you've got the physical characteristics. Okay, so like it says there, I won't read them all through, but you've got physical characteristics around mechanical, electrical, and so on. Sensory, behavioural, temporal, ergonomic, and functional. So the idea is your management system is seeking to control the quality of these characteristics within your service or product that you provide. Okay, so these are all things that your management system is intended to control, have an oversight on. Okay. So the object itself then, okay, that's an entity, an item, or anything that's perceivable or conceivable as part of what you provide or produce as an organization. Like it says there, a product, service, a process, the person itself, the organization, the system, or resource. Okay, so those objects can be material, non-material, or imagined. Okay, so the idea is, I know there's lots of don't want to over confuse this here, but obviously the idea is that the management system is seeking to control the characteristics of that said object. Okay, whatever it is you're producing or seek to be providing as an organization. Okay, so looking at the requirements then. Okay, so the requirements, okay, is a need or expectation that is stated, generally implied, or obligatory. Okay, so obligatory as a result of contract or regulatory requirement and so on. Okay, so the idea is generally implied means that it's custom or common practice for the organization and interested parties that need or expectation under consideration is implied. Okay, so lots of fun, lots of jazzy words and things going here, but basically it's a requirement that either your customer wants, or that is stated within a regulatory requirement, or whatever it may be. Okay, so when we think about what quality is, okay, the degree to which those characteristics of the object are being met in line with requirements. Okay, so your management system fundamentally is making sure that these requirements are identified, and that the necessary controls are put in place to ensure those requirements are being met. Okay, so fundamentally, the main requirement here, as you'll all be aware, or hopefully be aware, is what the customer wants, the customer requirements. Okay, whatever the contract is saying, that's the main thing. That's really, customer focus is the main gist of your 9001 management system. Okay, so talking about a what is a quality management system? So we know what quality is now. It's just the idea of requirements being met, requirements around characteristics of an object being met. Okay, so then your management system, okay, very, very simple. Okay, it's obviously, apart from what your manual and forms and procedures are set up around. Okay, a management system, okay, is a set of interrelated or interacting elements of an organization to establish policies and objectives and processes to achieve those objectives. Okay, so the idea basically is a set of established processes, procedures, learning, objectives, and so on. Basically, a system that is set up to ensure those intended outcomes, what you're trying to achieve, those characteristics can all be met. Okay, so obviously, as we know, management systems can cover a number of disciplines. So you've got quality, obviously financial, environmental, and so on. Okay. And obviously embedded within that, you have supporting things like your roles, responsibilities, planning, operation policies, and so on, okay? And when you're setting up your system, it can be set up to cover many parts of your organization, various parts within it. Whatever size and shape you are as a business, your management system needs to be set up to make sure that's being addressed, okay? So basically, keeping it simple. So we looked at what quality is. Okay, so quality is the degree to which characteristics and requirements are being met of an object. So okay, your product or service, and your management system is purely set up to facilitate those characteristics being met. Okay, so don't need to overthink it anything more than that. I put the words in here so you've got them as reference points, but it really is just a case of keeping it as simple as that. Okay, what you're trying to achieve, and your system is in place to achieve that. Okay, that's all a management system is. Okay, so we spoke earlier on about kind of sort of quality control versus assurance. Okay, so basically 9001 has evolved over the years. Those of you who've been involved in the industry for any length of time, certainly I can remember this. Quality control has got this kind of incredible stigma associated with it, that it's really just a case of, the people in the, the quality control department measuring things, giving it the QC stamp, and away it goes out the door. Traditionally, obviously quality has been focused on that. It's basically capturing things before they reach the customer, before they leave the building. Oh, that's good, it hasn't left us, we can put it right before it reaches the customer. Okay, but obviously relying upon quality control is not so good, because you've got to have someone either doing 100% inspection or testing, whatever it may be, and that's not always effective, because in terms of, or efficient, I should say. Okay, so the idea of a management system, it now is intended to provide a degree of assurance, okay, rather so to ensure that the processes are being controlled, that your management system is in place to support the intended outcomes, that your product is going to be consistent and reliable, okay, and give the customer what they want. So in summary, rather than waiting upon someone to capture it at the end, the idea is that you do a lot of planning at the front end to make sure that your system assures that your product or service is going to meet the intended requirements, and its quality, okay, that the quality of the product or service, the quality characteristic, is being met. Okay, so we know what quality is. Your system is in place basically to assure quality within your system. Okay, so like it says on the screen there, the main difference between kind of quality control and assurance is that confidence. It's having confidence in your management system, confidence that your people, your processes, your infrastructure can provide a quality product that meets requirements. Okay, so this all it's about 9001. It's nothing more to overthink the whole thing. I know certainly during audits and when I'm auditing, people kind of really overthink it, what a management system needs to look like. But fundamentally, it's just about giving assurance that your product or service can meet intended requirements. Okay, nothing more than that. And you can set it up in whatever shape and size you feel is best for you. Okay. So I've spoken a couple of times already about intended outcomes. Okay, so intended outcomes of a management system then. Okay, so fundamentally, you've obviously got customer requirements, okay, compliance and conformance, customers being satisfied, hopefully making some money somewhere along the way. Okay, obviously, like I said, an intended outcome is given assurance that the system can work as intended. Okay, and the manager, your product service is providing what it needs to. Okay, so looking at some of the intended outcomes then. Okay, so achieve your policy. You've got your quality policy, which is your main your headline document within your management system. So that sets your framework. Okay, it's often quite an overlooked part of a management system. Okay, look at that front end. Okay, you've got a quality policy statement that has all these wonderful things. Okay, and your management system really needs to be able to support that policy being implemented. Okay, and rolled out across the organization and being seen. Okay, so fulfilling your objectives, like it says on the screen there, the idea of focusing on your customer, hopefully then being satisfied. Okay, compliance with regulatory regulations or statutory requirements or contractual requirements, leading to improvement, God willing. Okay, enhanced performance and efficiency, improving communication, hopefully kind of giving a degree of consistency over your management system and your product and service, commercial gain. Ultimately, it's I know many of the clients that I go into, most of them have it for a commercial reason or contractual reason. Okay, and also looking at reducing risks. So when you're setting up your management system, just really take a step back and say, what is, I often say to people when I'm on audits, to say, what is it you're trying to achieve here with your management system? What is it you're trying to get to the bottom of? What you're trying to achieve, okay? And then take it backwards from there. And say, okay, how are we going to facilitate that? How is our system going to support that happening? The worst thing you can do, and I will bring it up later as well, the worst thing you can do is just set up a system just to satisfy an auditor. It makes it hard work for everyone, and it's really tough going. There's no need to do that because it's a relatively simple thing. Okay, very easy to overthink a 9001 management system, but fundamentally just think about what it is you're trying to achieve. Okay, take it back, just write it down if you like. Okay, put down a list of things and say, okay, this is what we're trying to achieve with this, and then how are we going to set our system up? How are we going to design our system, our forms, our processes, our training, our competence, our infrastructure to be able to support that happening? Okay, it's a system. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is the whole idea of like Plan, Do, Check, Act. Most of you, or PDCA, for those that haven't come across it, it stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. Okay, so it's embedded within 9001, has been for an awful long time now. Okay, and it really does kind of reach out to kind of, you know, the fundamental principles of 9001 and what it's all about. The slide that's on your screen illustrates, those of you familiar with 9001 will be familiar with the clause numbering and so on. And the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle is essentially, or vice versa, built around those clause numbers. Okay, so at the front end, you've got this idea of, you know, establishing who you are contextually, so who you are, what you do, and who you do it for, and where you do it, and so on. Okay, looking at your interested parties, so your customers, your employees, your workforce, your subcontractors, your neighbours, and so on. Okay, looking at the scope and determining what applies. Okay, getting leadership involved, looking at the risks associated with the whole thing, applying the resources to it. So that all sits in the front end of the planning phase. So when you're looking up and setting up a management system, it is very simple as that. Okay, it's you're planning for your system. You're looking at who are we, what do we do, what is our management system intended to cover, what could go wrong with our management system, what resources do we need, what are we trying to achieve, have we got leadership involved, have we got the support and engagement that we need, and so on. So that's all your front-end planning. Okay, leads into your section 8, which is all about doing things. Okay, so operational planning and control and dealing with emergency situations and so on. Doing the job, earning the money, providing the service, manufacturing the widgets, whatever it may be. Okay, then you're leading into the check side of things. So the check-in basically is making sure that what you've intended to achieve via your planning phase is that being achieved. So that's where things like audits, management review come in. Okay, your own internal checks and measures and quality control and assurance and so on. Okay, and then that leads into a form of action if need be. So if there's issues raised or customer feedback, or, you know, your own internal monitoring is highlighted an issue, well, let's act upon that. Okay, let's look at our planning. A management system shouldn't stand still. Okay, it's the idea that, you know, I think an old phrase that used to be used in the industry, you could manufacture, you know, bad stuff as long as it was consistently bad stuff. It was there was a different word used for that, but I'm sure you get what I mean. But basically, it's the idea was that it didn't really matter what you did as long as it was consistent. Whereas now there's this idea within a management system that you continually improve, and you look to improve your effectiveness, and you look to make sure that things are, you know, improving for you as an organisation and your customers. Okay. So yeah, a very, very simple thing. Plan, Do, Check, Act. It's nothing particularly profound. You know, this isn't some kind of mystical art that we'll keep secret within NQA or any other certification body or the industry. This is nothing particularly complex. Okay, it's just good business operations. But the idea of 9001, it standardizes and kind of gives a structure to those good practices that you have as organizations, and puts that into a system, like we've already said, for achieving those results, making sure things are consistent, managing risk, and so on and so forth. Okay, so yeah, keeping it simple, going really back to basics. No need to overthink this. I think that's one of the things I always say to clients on auditing: don't overthink something. Sometimes you can read a clause within a standard and it just loses all meaning after a while, but just, you don't need to do that. Just what it's asking for, keep it simple, take a step back. Okay, so yeah, planning, establish what needs to be achieved. Okay, so what are we trying to achieve here? You know, that could be improvement, product conformity, you know, kind of making millions of pounds, whatever it may be. Okay, and organize the resources to achieve that. Put your objectives in place, put your targets in place, get everyone involved and on board, and plan what you need to do. Okay, then you implement the process. Hopefully then you'll check it and make sure things are working. And it's okay, by the way, if things aren't being met. Well, I think one of the kind of misunderstood things within auditing is that the goal is to have kind of no non-conformities, or no findings, or when you present a set of internal audits that it's all nice and clean, everything was okay. There's something that when I go in and do audits and the client gives me a set of audits that's got lots of findings, we're not talking about being nitpicky or anything like that, but lots of observations or non-conformities. It's not a bad thing, because it shows that the system is being challenged, it's being looked at. Okay, so don't be afraid to do that. So when you're looking at your system, don't be afraid to challenge it and have people kind of report back on things that need addressing. It can be considered a bit of a negative in the whole thing, but it's really not what it's about at all. And fundamentally as well, make sure you act upon any findings that you're coming across. Okay, so plan, do, check, act. Very, very simple, nothing particularly profound. There's tons of information out there on the internet and so on and so forth. And those of you that got a copy of 9001, it's embedded in the front of the standard there. Actually there's a little picture of that whole PDCA cycle. Okay, so keeping it back to basics again, you're just looking at what you're trying to achieve and make sure the system can achieve that. Okay, your plan, do, check, act process. Okay. One of the things I wanted to talk about was because it's a principle that's embedded within 9001, this idea of the process approach. Okay, it can cause a bit of confusion, but there's really no need for it to, because keeping it very simple. Okay, basically any organization is going to be following a set of steps. Okay, and those steps, when they're joined together, basically I'll form your basis for process. Okay, so in the simplest form, we can have a manufacturing organization that takes a set of customer requirements through to buying the material to manufacture it, through to a planning process, through to actually the machines working away, through to kind of inspection and dispatch, through to delivery and after sales and so on. So the idea is that you're going to have some organizations have, well, you will have an overall arching process that takes the whole kind of beginning to end, and then you have kind of supporting processes. Okay, so things like training and calibration and design and so on. So when you look at your management system, and again, a system is a set of interrelated processes and procedures that form a common goal. Okay, so that's what you're after. Okay, so look at your processes as an organization, decide what you're trying to achieve with each of them. Okay, what are the what are the measures, what are the indicators, what is the good, bad, and what are you trying to achieve with these things, and then make sure that your system is set up to make sure these processes are as effective as they possibly can be. Okay. And the idea of the whole process approach, okay, is it comes back to the whole assurance that we mentioned earlier. Okay, so consistent and predictable results are achieved more effectively and efficiently when activities are understood and managed as interrelated processes that function as a coherent system. So the idea is you haven't just got different departments and things, silos working away in isolation. The idea is it all joins together, it becomes a system. There's the word again, okay, that the whole kind of the organization works together towards common goal or common goals, okay, that lead to those intended outcomes that we saw earlier. Okay, so the QMS itself, your management system, consists of interrelated processes, and understanding how the results are produced by the system enables the organization to optimize the system and its performance. So that's the key thing, making sure that your system is set up to give you information that you can act upon. Okay. So when you're looking at your process approach, then okay, look at possible actions, things to consider. Okay, so define the objectives, what you're trying to achieve. Okay, establish authority, understand your capabilities, determine processing interdependencies, and analyze any effective modifications to those individual processes. But basically, kind of just look at what you're doing. Okay, taking this back to kind of basics again, look at what you're trying to achieve, who's responsible for making sure that happens, determine what you need to resource and make things to get the outcomes that you need to, okay, and make sure if anything changes that you can react to that. Okay. Making sure obviously your processes are managed as an effective system. Okay, make sure any necessary information is made available, okay, to the relevant persons that need to know about it. Okay, and also as well look at the risks involved with that whole process. Okay, what's the risks associated with not achieving your management system working effectively. Okay. So looking at some of the things associated with the process then, okay, you've got your typical kind of supporting processes like quality assurance itself, okay, documented information control, internal audits, management review, and so on, all those things that kind of make things tick, okay. Then you've got your organizational side of things around security, HR, facilities, and so on and so forth. So the idea is when you're looking at your management system and getting it to be the size and shape that you want it, okay, you're looking at all these processes. How do they work? You know, what are the steps? What does one department need to know from the next to make sure that it's all working effectively? And that's really the essence of a 9001 management system. Okay, making sure that your processes work together, they support each other, and you know what the intended outcomes are being met. Okay. The principles then around sort of quality management, okay, and therefore kind of 9001, okay, there's 7 of these, okay. So the first one is pretty straightforward, okay, and it's customer focus, okay. So 9001 is basically built around customer focus, okay, and a management system facilitating that assurance to give the customers what they want. That's the fundamental thing, okay. Leadership, absolutely. Those who've been around 9001 for any length of time will know that previously the whole responsibility of a management system could be given away to an individual or a group of people. Now leadership and top management do need to get involved in the whole process, okay? And obviously that creates that sense of direction and unity and purpose, okay? So embedded within 9001, certainly customer focus. Leadership, certainly, you've got a whole section around leadership that needs to be considered, okay? Third principle is around the engagement of people. Okay, so one of the things I always say to people is, you know, if you've got a quality department, you know, it's not about kind of them fighting the battle all by themselves. Get people involved. If people understand what's expected of them and what their role is within a management system, they're and if they had some kind of input into it, more than likely they're going to be wanting to support it and engage with it and so on. Okay. So do make sure you get that. There's not a requirement in 9001 about engagement of people, but obviously there are clauses around kind of communication and awareness and so on. So the whole idea is that if someone's not aware of what they should be doing or why they're doing it, it's one of the oldest kind of ideas in the book, that if they don't know, then they don't necessarily respond or be engaged with it. Okay. Fourth principle is around the process approach, like we said earlier. This idea of, you know, 9001 is quality management systems, okay? It's not about just these individual clauses, boxes being ticked. It's about a management system supporting the processes within an organization, okay? So taking it back to basics, again, just looking at what you're trying to achieve and making a system, setting that up to achieve that, okay? There's a requirement within 9001 around continual improvement, like we said earlier on. Just to keep doing the same old thing over and over again is okay to a degree, but you need to be showing improvement, okay, active improvement within your management system and your processes and your people and your infrastructure and so on. Okay, so looking at the back end, remember you think about the plan, do, check, act cycle. The whole acting side of things is where this kind of improvement thing kicks in. You're making evidence-based decisions, looking at how you can improve as an organization and taking the whole thing from there, you know, training people, investing in infrastructure, although tough thing to do nowadays with things being as they are, but obviously it's you know, looking at your efficiency of your systems, the efficiency of your process. Are we doing what we need to do? Are we achieving what we need to achieve? Okay, like it says there, the evidence-based decision making. So within your system, as you're doing your checking processes, you're doing your audits, you're doing your quality control checks and so on and so forth, you're doing your supply approvals and so on, is that all those processes will be giving you evidence with which to make decisions to improve your management system. Go back to your planning phase and make sure those things are implemented. Okay. And then lastly, relationship management. So lots of relationships within an organization that 9001 covers, from obviously internal communications, client communications, certainly your supply chain, and so on and so forth, your various other interested parties. 9001 uses the term interested parties, okay? So whoever they may be, and whatever role they may play within your organization and your management system, manage those expectations. What do they need? What effect can they have on you as a business? Okay, and that's all about that front-end planning within 9001. Okay, we could probably spend a whole an hour on each clause. Okay, but obviously just going to run through some of the key things here and hopefully try and sort of, you know, demystify a little bit. Okay. So some of the kind of key requirements then, okay, it's within 9001, really kind of straightforward. Okay, you've got this idea of key requirements around the context. Okay, so can be a thing that kind of people struggle with this sometimes. It's what does context mean? Well, it fundamentally just basically means relevance. Okay, that's all I say to people. If you don't like the word context, use the word relevance. Okay, so the idea is your management system should be relevant to you as an organization. It shouldn't just be overcomplicated and written by a consultant who just made it millions and millions of pages that it doesn't mean anything to you. If that's not working, change it. Okay, make it the right size and shape and color and format, whatever you like to work for you. Okay, keep it in context, keep it relevant. Okay. Interested parties, like we just said, really important to a management system, because fundamentally, certainly 9001, because it talks about, what do they want? One of the key interested parties obviously is your customers, and the standard talks about the needs and expectations of those interested parties, and your management system should be set up to make sure those needs are being identified, the expectations are being met, and your system can support that happening. Okay. There's a whole section in 9001 about within the planning side of things around risk and opportunities. Coming on to next about often misunderstood part of the standard, but fundamentally it's looking around how the intended outcomes of 9001, how might they be missed and how might they not be achieved. And as a management system, that should be looking to address those risks, close them out, put in actions to mitigate them, and so on. Okay. Customer focus, absolutely. Give the customer what they want, make sure the quality is being met. That thing we spoke about half an hour ago now, the idea of quality. Are those characteristics that your customers are expecting, are they being met? Okay, are they being achieved? Are those requirements being determined? And is that being met? Leadership, absolutely. Okay, like we said earlier, top management, that's the people that are responsible for the business and direction and so on. Ultimately, they need to get involved. Okay, it's a basic requirement in 9001. It's very explicit. There's section 5 within the standards, got a whole section on what's expected of leaders and top management. Okay, really do make sure it's a mandatory requirement. Okay, there's lots of shalls in there. Okay, so leaders do need to get involved and support this process. Okay. Take that process approach, like we said earlier. Don't think of a management system just as a set of isolated clauses and that's document control, so and so deals with that, that's design, they deal with that, and there's purchasing, they deal with that. 9001 asks you to think of your management system as processes. Okay, the steps are interrelated, the whole thing works together. As a business, you might work in certain departments, but fundamentally it all needs to move. It's an interlinked and interrelated process. Okay, that needs to be, and the system needs to be considered that way. And obviously the improvement. Okay, so yeah, absolutely. It's a mandatory requirement. You can't stand still. 9001 does ask for that kind of that whole improvement, continual improvement process approach. Okay. So some of the things, just a few things I wanted to run through with you guys about missed or misunderstood. Okay. One of the things we've already kind of touched on already is this idea of context. Okay, so yeah, it's a really important part of the standard. It's of 9001, and it's a really fundamental, basic kind of principle that is one of the key changes they made when they updated the standard in 2015. They introduced this idea of context because as an industry, we found that management systems are just very generic, kind of not working particularly well. So they said, okay, everything that you do within your system needs to be relevant. Okay, make it work for you. Don't just have kind of like a sausage machine kind of type system that spits out the same thing over and over again. Oh, we've got all these forms because we thought we needed them. Well, are they relevant to us? Do they add some value? Yes or no? Okay, so keep things in context. Okay, think of the internal issues, the external issues. So obviously internal, such as your workforce and so on and so forth, and external, such as political things, if you like, economic and social, those things that can influence you as a business and how you recognize those and adapt to those. Okay, and keep it up to date. Okay, it's not a standstill thing, this. Okay, contextual issues change all the time, so do keep that kind of up to date. You don't need to write a big long contextual statement, like you don't need to write like a big history of your organization and so on and so forth. You can do if you want to. If you want to write something down, that's fine, but just make sure your system's set up to be relevant and the right size and shape for you. Okay, really, really important. Okay, because it does often get missed. Kind of you're looking at something and saying, well, we've got this big management system, but it loses all loses all context the deeper you get into it. Okay. Interested parties, like we say, really, really important. And again, you're not expected to maintain a list of interested parties and what their needs and expectations are. If you want to, that's absolutely fine, okay? But the intent of this clause is just to make sure that your management system, again, is recognizing what you're trying to achieve and who you're trying to achieve that for. Okay, that's the really kind of association with this clause. Okay, so yeah, don't miss it. Write a list if you like, and it helps you, but you don't need to. And obviously, that's another thing I'd say within the standard. Just be aware of things like where it's asking you to document things. Okay, so have a little look through where it's asking you to document, write things down. Where it's not, look at the risk of not writing things down. Okay, if you function as a business without it, and it's not required by the standard, then you can kind of have some justification there. But don't feel like you've got a management system isn't about writing loads and loads of things down. It's about having evidence to show that it's working, but it's not about recording every single thing. Okay, just keep it where things are necessary. Okay, and obviously interested parties, some of the needs and expectations associated with those will be around documentation, such as contractual things and so on and so forth. Okay. So leadership then, okay, like I said earlier, it's leaders, top management do need to get involved in supporting the management system. Not expected to be involved in the day-to-day operation necessarily. Obviously, depends upon the type and shape of the business. But leadership do make sure that you kind of get your head around that and what it's asking for, because there are a lot of principles in there, okay, that the management 9001 is asking for, okay. And the idea is, as leaders, they're just expected to kind of promote and support and engage with the management system. Okay, it's not just, oh, get the certificate on the wall, that's all I want to know about. No, they need to be involved in the management review process in terms of setting objectives, the planning process. Okay, like we spoke about earlier. So get leadership involved in that process. They might come kicking and screaming, but they've got to do it. Okay, so and be prepared to be. They should be prepared to be kind of questioned or interviewed, if you like, during an external and an internal audit process. Okay, because they do need to get involved in the whole thing. Okay, they just got to ensure the management system is integrated with what the business does. It shouldn't just be that standalone box in the corner that gets dragged out kicking and screaming and dusted off every time the auditors come in. It's not what it's about. And leadership has got to be a fundamental part of supporting that system within the organisation. Okay. Risks and opportunities then. Now, touched on it earlier, whenever people hear the word risk, they kind of instantly kind of default to kind of health and safety, which is obviously, in some ways correct. But risk within 9001, basically, I did a webinar on this a little while ago now, and basically the phrase that's used is the risks associated with not achieving the intended outcome. So remember earlier on we spoke about the intended outcomes of your system, so improvement, achieving your policy, achieving your objectives, keeping your customers happy, and so on. All those things, you've got to look at what things can trip you up there and can stop you from achieving those. Okay, and then you need to address those risks, take actions to mitigate them. Okay, commonly misunderstood. Okay, and obviously look at the opportunities associated on the other side of the coin. Okay, so look at opportunities within for improving efficiency and effectiveness and investment and so on. Okay, so risks and opportunities, fundamental part of planning within your management system. Okay, and also the doing, and then checking to make sure the actions that you've determined have they been effective, and do we need to take any further ones acting on them. Okay, really fundamental principle within 9001. Okay, design, probably could do a whole webinar on design, truth be told, but I wanted to just touch on this because it can sometimes throw in a bit of confusion. In the old days, it used to be really talk about just the idea of a conceptual design of a product, like kind of a widget being designed for a particular purpose. Whereas now 9001, it's really kind of talks about, it's more about how you design your service, your system, and to deliver kind of the subsequent product or service. Okay, so I will do a further webinar on this because it's probably quite a chunky subject we could talk about. Okay, a lot of misunderstanding within the industry, but fundamentally, it's how you it's the phrase that they use in there. It's anything. It's that the organisation should establish, implement, and maintain a design development process that is appropriate to ensure the subsequent provision of products and services. So what they're saying there is anything that you do as an organisation that can affect the subsequent provision of products and services, i.e. anything that you do has usually got some kind of design associated with it. So quite often misunderstood. So yeah, watch this space, because I will put another one out on design. We'll probably spend a good hour talking about that, because it can cause some problems. Okay. Procurement, well, control of externally provided processes, products, and services. So we like to call it, simply taking it back to basics, purchasing. Okay, so as an organisation, chances are you won't do everything, okay, within that. Because I always think of a construction company, for example. They very rarely does everyone within that construction company able to do everything. You know, they're not got a big load of plumbers and electricians and ground workers all sitting around doing nothing. They'll contract that work in. Okay, so fundamentally, but when you do that, that's absolutely fine. But you need to make sure that your management system controls that. Okay, so you need to have the right criteria and methodology in place to say, look, okay, this is being performed for us on our behalf. Our management system, okay, needs to assure the quality of that product or service. Okay, so you've not got direct control over them, but your management system needs to make sure that that is giving some control over the processes as necessary. Okay, so the phrase that I use is that you can't kind of outsource your liability. Okay, you're still responsible. As far as the customer's concerned, they're paying you. They don't care that you get A, B, C limited to do it. Your management system needs to provide that quality assurance we spoke about earlier, that what the customer's getting is as per requirements. Okay, the quality is being met. Okay, so yeah, make sure that if you're outsourcing something, that's fine, but don't just don't forget them. Okay. Internal audits, a really fundamental part, a really basic part of 9001. And yes, obviously you do need to do them. Okay, if the auditors like to see them, external auditors, but fundamentally don't lose sight of what an internal audit is about. It's about looking at the management system. Is it being implemented? Is it being maintained? And is it effective? Okay, don't just see them as a pain, because I know they are, they take up your time, but they're really important part of that check-in process that we spoke about earlier. So a real basic principle within 9001 is about looking at, you know, your own internal audit process. Don't just do them for the sake of it. Please, you know, get people involved. You know, kind of, you know, train up auditors, get them challenging their own, you know, peer reviews and so on, and looking at your system and looking at how you can be better as an organisation, making the management system more effective. Okay, and don't be afraid if findings come up. You know, it's not mandatory that you find non-conformities, but it's always nice when you see a good set of audits that show that, you know, there's actions being taken, issues being identified, and improvements being made. So yeah, don't feel that the goal of internal audit is to have no non-conformities and just a report that shows that everything's okay. It's not. It may be the case, but don't be afraid if findings come up. Okay. And lastly, just for this kind of misunderstood, the whole idea of management review outputs. Okay, so as you know, 9001 asks that, you know, a management review process happens. 9 times out of 10, okay, that was the output of the management review process is a set of minutes, which isn't necessarily the wrong, but the 9001 does ask that you generate certain actions and outputs as a result of management review process, not just a set of minutes what was spoken about. It asks you, there's certain decisions being made around kind of resources. Is the management system still effective, fit for purpose, and so on? So when you look at that clause, okay, it's asking for, like it says there, the intent of this clause is to ensure that the management review provides information on and actions and decisions on what needs to be done to improve and maintain the management system. It's not just about having a set of minutes that shows everything that's spoken about. There needs to be some output from that. Okay. Very rarely should a management review have no actions at all. In fact, it shouldn't do, because that would be a non-conformance within 9001. Okay, so don't just look at what you should be talking about. Look at what should be happening as a result of the management review. Okay, it's all in that clause. Okay, don't miss that. It does often get missed. Okay. So keeping it simple then, I said earlier on about the whole idea of, you know, taking this back to basics and looking at what a management system is really all about. Okay, so just a couple of slides here just before we kind of, you know, just finish off and go to some questions. Okay, basically keep it simple. Okay, I know it's a cliched phrase, and, you know, there's all these kinds of things, but basically fundamentally when you're looking at your management system 9001, don't overcomplicate it, don't overthink it, don't overread it. I say to people sometimes, when you're reading the standard, just sometimes take a physical step and say, what is this actually asking me to do? Okay, so, but at the front end, like it says there, decide what you're trying to achieve with your organization. So yes, make some money, God willing, okay, keep people employed, yes, but fundamentally, you're looking at your customers, being in compliance, improvement, be more efficient and effective. Okay, so well, okay, how is our management system going to help us do that? Okay, and then look at the moving parts within that. Look at the people involved, look at the infrastructure, look at the processes, look at the documentation. Is this all working? Is it all in context? Is it doing what we need to do? Okay, so yeah, what you're trying to achieve there, the second point there, your policy, your objectives, improvement, efficiency, and profit. Okay, so how are we going to make our system help us? How is this going to help us achieve this? Okay, determine what you do, how you do it, the communication and sticking points, go, no-go stages, any interactions, communications, risks, and known issues. So basically, yeah, look at what you do as an organization and say, well, okay, what do we do to address this? Okay, are there any issues that we need to address? What communications are we going to have in place? You know, kind of what points do they interact? Okay, and make sure our system is designed and fit up around that. Okay. Plan how you're going to address the points. Okay, so what you're trying to achieve and how the whole thing works. Okay, and then check on what you're doing. Okay, is what you're planning to do being effective? Are the actions being effective? Is your training being effective? Is our purchasing control effective? Is our quality, inspection frequency effective? All the variables that happen with you as a business, they're all part of your checking. Every part of your business has got a relevant clause within 9001. Okay, so it's you're about to kind of hang your hat on something within 9001 to say, well, okay, that sits in there. It will sit somewhere in the plan to checkout process. And if something's not happening, okay, make changes to address it. Okay, your system's allowed to change. Don't be afraid. It's not mandatory that your system gets up issued and revised every year, but very unusual for it to stay static over a period of time. So yeah, change it. Change your forms, change your way of doing things. There's absolutely nothing wrong as long as that change is carried out in a planned manner, and you look at how that can all be affected. Okay, within your system. Last little bit, so yeah, engage and involve people. Yeah, okay, so the more people get involved with and support and engage the whole thing, more chances are they're going to be more inclined to want to adhere to it and support it. Okay, not guaranteed, but it's a good chance that they're going to, if they've been involved in what's the word, developing it and kind of coming up with ideas, there's a good chance they're going to kind of be a bit more inclined to support the whole thing moving forward. Okay. Please don't create a system to please an auditor. Okay, it's I know, I realise obviously we're a necessary evil, but it's really, your system is your system. Okay, it's meant to be a means of achieving an end. Okay, and that your system needs to be set up to be the right size and shape for you as your organisation. Okay, please don't just keep it that box in the corner that comes out and we fill in all these forms, or we do this because we did it once and we were told to do it. Well, nothing wrong with questioning things. Okay, is this worthwhile? Is this adding value to what we do as an organization? Okay, reverse engineer things sometimes. Look at, sometimes I quite often see people picking up the standard and saying, well, maybe the easiest way of addressing this clause is just to generate a form to show that we're doing something. Well, that may not be required. Okay, just look at what you're doing and say, well, okay, we're doing that. Does that meet the standard? Okay, look at the other way around. Don't look at the standard and implement something. Look at what you're doing and seeing how that reflects in the standard. Okay, look at the way around. Okay, remember, it's your system. Okay, means of achieving an end. Okay, so look at what you're trying to achieve and make sure your system actually kind of, you've got the right steps in place to get to that goal. Okay, keep it simple, ensure it adds value, that it controls your system and it informs you as an organization. Okay, I know it's a word that sometimes again loses meaning, but it is a system. Okay, it's a means of achieving something. Okay, it's not just a set of paperwork that comes with that gets generated and gets audited once a year. It's part and parcel of what you do as an organization, integrated to what you do as a business. Okay, really, really important. Okay, so good. Pretty much 50 minutes or so thereabouts. Obviously quite a bit to talk about. It's kind of only really, I said half joking when I started doing this, I thought, is there going to be people that are interested in what it's all about? And it turns out there is some of the things that I've been speaking about has been talking along. I can see that there's scope to go a bit deeper on those. But I think kind of really kind of keeping it simple, kind of the idea, going back to 9001, back to basics. It's just looking about, okay, it's system that helps you achieve your intended results. Okay, it really is as simple as that. So making sure you've got the right means to achieve, keep the customer happy, demonstrate improvement, be compliant with regulations and so on, and make sure the whole thing fits together. Remember the plan, do, check out. That's really just a simple way of thinking about it. Okay. So yeah, you don't need to overthink the whole thing. It's like I say, I've been doing this a long time, and this isn't, like I say, some particular kind of wonderful art that we all get taught in some special school somewhere. It's not what it's about at all. Okay, it's a very kind of it's not a simple standard. There's a lot to it, but the principles are kind of very simple. Okay, and don't overthink it. Look at what you're doing or trying to achieve, and does our system help us get there? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my eyes open now for any questions that anyone's got. I'll answer them kind of just in, well, let's have a look, see what we've got here. So, and I'll answer them out loud if there's not too many. If it gets a few too many, we can answer them in a separate kind of a free like that. So what's happening here? Will the okay? Will the slides be shared with the participants at the end? Yes, they will. Okay. I think this might just be a little typo. Okay, what should you do if you do not design your own products? Well, if you don't design them, remember, design development is not just about products. It can be design development of a service. Okay, so even though you might not design develop your own products, okay, if you might design the means by which those products are used, if that makes sense, or the service associated with them. So design development isn't just around a product like a widget as such. It's about that's what I was talking about earlier. It could be a subject for another day, but fundamentally it's about means which that service is provided. If you're involved in developing that, then that's a design thing as well. Okay. Yes, management review meeting is mandatory. Yes, it is. Okay, that absolutely is. Yes, you have to have management review. Absolutely, yeah. Obviously, and the inputs to that management review are very important. But so are, the point I was trying to make there was that it's the output of the management review. Okay, that's as important to discuss the input. Okay, it's the decisions that are made around the management system, the resources that are needed, the effectiveness. Is the management system still fit for purpose? Okay, and that's the way to consider the management review process. Okay. When do you decide what is non-conformance or not non-conformance? How do you determine this? Okay, so well, basically, a non-conformance. We used to have an accountant years and years ago, and he used to say to us, it was nothing to do with 9001, but it was to do with the accountant. He said, "You can't be a little bit pregnant." Okay, and it's a phrase I use quite a bit, but fundamentally, there, if a standard is or a piece of a customer contract or a piece of regulation, whatever it may be, if that's not being met, okay, then that is a non-conformance. Okay, so if the standard is saying you shall do this, or the organization is to do this, or a contract within your service, production is saying that you will use this type of material or whatever it may be, and that's not happening, that's a non-conformance. Okay, it's usually quite a sort of a binary thing, a non-conformance. If you can't hang your hat on something, okay, then as in a requirement, then that's what it then it's not a non-conformance. Okay, so the definition of a non-conformance is non-fulfilled, whatever that happens to be. Okay, if it's not being met, if the box isn't being ticked, so to speak, then that's a non-conformance. Okay. Someone's here. Are there any noteworthy differences between the stage 2 audit for certificate and the first audit a year later? Are there that are audited, inspected? Right, okay, so the quick and dirty answer is yes, there are some differences. The way that the industry works, a stage 2 audit has to cover, or we have to look at every applicable clause, okay, within your management system. So that's the way that it is. That's usually why they're quite a reasonably length of time, depending upon the size of the organization. Okay, the surveillance visits, the 2 surveillance visits after, okay, they're shorter because we don't have to look at every applicable clause, but there are some things that we always tend to look at every visit. That is to say, we'll always tend to look at things like context, interested parties, audit, management review, objective, risks and opportunities, complaints, and so on. So if you like, all of I'll call them kind of boilerplate stuff, the bread and butter stuff, okay, the nuts and bolts of your system. The things that we can sample during a surveillance with things like, for example, say for example you design, okay, you might not look at design every time, okay, we might not look at purchasing, we might not look at training, we might not go, if you operate a temporary site, so if you're a construction company and you're doing something temporary site, we might not go to site every time. The idea is that over the 2 years we sample everything. So the answer to the question is, the difference between a stage 2 and a surveillance is that we don't look at every applicable clause, it's just sampled, and whatever clauses we don't look at 1 year, we'll look at the next. The idea is that over a 3-year program, we look at everything at least once. Okay, hopefully that's answered that, James. Is process approach different to plan, do, check, act, or part of it? I would say the PDCA process is a process itself, okay, and basically a management system is a process, okay. It's the idea that the sequence of going through a plan and do a check and an act is a process, okay. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with, you can call it what you like, but yeah, processes within an organization, there will be things like we've said, like design or purchasing or procurement, HR and so on, but yeah, they're the actual process that make with an organization. The overarching, intent is that you look at a plan, do, check, act process as a whole. So, that plan, do, check, act overlooks everything, looks at what you're trying to achieve, looks at your producing or delivery organization, and is that happening? Okay, are we planning effectively? Are we doing effectively? Is there a check-in process enough to give us confidence? And some people forget the acting, okay. Just make sure you act upon what, and make the changes as necessary. So yeah, the PDCA is a process in itself. It's part of your whole management system. Okay. The overall QMS program is straightforward. However, what are some methods to positively change organizational paradigms? Right. Okay. Goodness. Okay. That might be a conversation for. I'll probably have to take that one up home and have a little think about that one. Ken, if that's okay. I mean, obviously, yeah. I suppose one of the fundamental things about kind of changing attitudes and things is we said earlier, that engagement, to get people engaged. If you've got a management system that is just sitting there and dictating to people, yes, there obviously needs to be an element of that, but there needs to be a facility for people to be able to communicate. Communication within a management system isn't just about pushing and you shall, you must, you will. It's about having a facility to get people's kind of participation, if you like, and engagement back the other way as well. So making sure that leadership and so on are responsive to things that, the interested party, whoever they may be, is given back in. So that's the idea of a management system, but it's not just a push, it's a receipt as well, okay. So, and then how you respond to those things. Okay, that's probably one of the key things to remember there. Okay. Someone's asked, well, for chemicals manufacturing, based upon the information that question, I would say that it is, because well, if the chemical manufactured known recipe, so for example, if you're making just cakes, the fruit cakes over and over and over and over again, you're using the same recipe day in, day out, that wouldn't involve design, okay. But if you decide to modify the recipe to make it a little bit more fruity or a little bit more whatever it is, okay, development of a design there, okay. But what I would say is, it's a good example. If you're making a cake or making chemicals, what you may organization process by which you make that. So you design the infrastructure, you design the steps, you design the tests, the assignments. So you're planning not necessarily the chemical itself, okay, because that may be made to a known recipe, but what you would design is the means by which you manufacture. Okay, so what training is needed, what resources are needed, what checks and measures, what calibration needs to be done, so on and so forth. If there's any external, that's what's means by, it might not be as simple as it first seems. Okay, you're not designing a chemical. We're chemical manufacturers. Well, we don't design. All we're doing is making it the same recipe, whatever it may be. But you are designing because you're setting up a system to produce that chemical. There's an element of design there. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Okay. Is ISO 9001 certification for the person's completing the, is it for the entire company? Right, okay, this is probably, yeah, so is 9001 certification for the person's completing the training, or is it for the entire company? It depends what your management system scope is intending to cover. So ISO 9001 isn't a like a personnel, isn't it? qualification of an individual. You can get qualifications to be, you know, for internal auditing or lead auditing and so on, the auditing side of things, but 9001 is not a product or personnel certification, it's a management system certification. So typically, Kimberly, 9001 is it certifies the entire company, you know, depending on what that company does, okay, depending on what the scope of the system is. Okay, so it's not necessarily down to individuals or for individuals. What is the ideal number of management reviews each year? Good question. 9001, this is one of the things, 9001 that's sometimes frustrating is it doesn't, it's frustratingly vague sometimes, particularly for auditors. Some different schemes, they specify X amount of audits or reviews per year. 9001 just doesn't say, it just is basically management shall review the system at defined intervals. Now, obviously, I suppose I've got to go and say, you know, the minimum you'd like to expect to see would be once a year, okay? But obviously, what I would say to that is, and one thing to remember actually with management reviews, it doesn't say that you need to do one management review and speak about everything all in one go once a year, okay? Quite a lot of organisations I go into now, they certain things, you know, the 9001 management review clause. So the management review clause asks that you talk about certain things as agenda items, if you want to call them that, okay? It doesn't say that you need to talk about all of them at every management review once a year, okay? So what a lot of organisations are doing now is they're looking at things that kind of, you know, are particularly fluid or have a bit more information, such as, you know, process performance and products and that kind of thing. Okay, we'll talk about them every time, and other things we might not talk about quite so often. So don't want to confuse the issue there, but obviously, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't have to have an annual management review that covers everything. If you want to split, you know, some things quarterly, some things monthly, you know, talk about some things more often than others, that's absolutely fine, just as long as a whole, top management and the organisation is seen to be reviewing those required elements of the management system. Okay, so a preferred frequency. Okay, yeah, look, it's difficult. You know, we as auditors can't raise a non-conformance because you haven't had a management review once a year. But obviously, what we would look at, the way what I would look at it is, okay, what I would ask the question is, how have you come to this conclusion? It's when you're at school, okay, show your workings. Okay, if you decided that you're going to have one once a year, that's fine. But have you spoken about, well, where's your workings? You've come to that conclusion. Don't need it written down necessarily, but if someone could just say, well, okay, we feel this is effective for us, is within context as us an organisation. Okay. What is the difference between 9001 2008 and 9001 2015? Well, basically they're the same. Well, 9001 is 9001. The difference between 2008 and 2015 is that 2015 superseded 2008. It's just the next revision up. 2008 is no longer valid. It's just not recognised within the industry. Okay. Can you discuss the value of preventive actions reports? Well, the value of preventive action is effectively a means of standards. 9001 2008 used to use the term preventive action, okay, and they took that out. We used to have a clause around preventive action, and then what they did, they built it all into this whole front end section, the whole risk side of things, risks and opportunities. So the idea is that before something even happens, you've got ahead of the game. You're identifying wherever you can all the risks and uncertainties associated with your management system, your service delivery, your whatever it may be, your people, your processes, your infrastructure, and you're actively trying to mitigate all the risks and uncertainties that can lead to a non-conformance or a complaint or a bigger issue or deviation from compliance. So the value of preventive action reports, if you want to call it that, if you want to call it a risk, you know, assessment or whatever you like to call it, the idea is that it can lead to potential reduction of quality issues, costs, inefficiencies, customer complaints, whatever you like to call it. So the idea is if you're ahead of the game, and this is where assurance comes in as opposed to control, okay, you're not capturing it after the event, you're actively preventing things from going wrong by means of risk-based thinking, preventative actions, and so on and so forth. That's what you're after. And the benefits there are, you never know, might save you some money, might save your customer screaming, whatever it comes to, okay. Is it advisable to integrate another standard, for example, 27001 with 9001 from the offset, or would you advise keeping the standard separate for easy management? Okay, good question. There's a okay. The advantages to integrating are that the way the standard's set up now, when you look at any ISO, or the majority of them, the ones that we're talking about, management system standards, they'll be structured around this Annex SL, okay, which talks about context, leadership, planning, support, operation, so on and so forth. The advantage is that obviously within those things, there's going to be common themes running through, so you don't need to duplicate. So yeah, there is an advantage to doing it, not just because of your own internal workload. It can lead to a potential reduction in audit time from a third party perspective, because we don't need to look at things separately. We can integrate them. Okay, obviously that's something you need to talk about with your certification body, but fundamentally the advantage there is efficiency in terms of time. It can be more effective because you're not having to duplicate things and lots of moving parts. Obviously, that assumes that the person or persons that are doing that are competent to service all those things in one go. Okay, so the reason you might want to keep them separately, sometimes there's different departments, people looking after different parts of the business. Okay, but yeah, there are advantages. There's advantages because it's efficient, it can be more effective, it reduces that repetition, and enables you to kind of focus on the common things that are running through your business. Okay. Okay. 8.3 applicable for that. That's that. Oops, informative. Thanks. A lot of elaboration. Do we need internal auditor training for internal audit? The standard doesn't say you need to, but obviously the person performing a task needs to be competent for that role. Okay, so we'd like to see that if someone is performing internal audits, we always like to say, well, okay, how has that person been chosen for that role? What competence do you feel is necessary to fulfill that role or meet the objectives of that role? And has that person met that criteria, that competence criteria? So the standard doesn't say mandate training, but what it does say is the person's performing roles need to be competent based upon education, training, skills, or experience. Okay, so as an auditor, I'll say to you, okay, so who's doing the internal audits? Okay, it's Bill. Okay, what competence does Bill need to have be able to do that? Okay. We'll support that. Okay, so yeah, a formal qualification is a good idea because it can help everyone. It can make it more effective process. Okay. Simon, can the scope of the system just be for part of the organization, for example, warehouse operations, and exclude customer services sales? Quick and dirty answer is yes, it can. Okay, need to be a little bit careful. An example I would use for you is in a previous life, still auditing, I used to certify a council, a local authority. When you think how the moving parts within a council, the only parts we used to certify was their procurement and their fleet management. Okay, so as long as their management system, the scope of their management system and their certification just stated exactly that, it was explicit to what they said. Obviously, what you do need to be careful of is you can't exclude something if it ultimately affects what you're providing or the service that you're providing, your product or service that you're providing. So, for example, if the warehouse operations is what's being certified, but there's obviously other parts of the business that affect that. Okay, that needs to be covered by the management system as well. Okay, because otherwise it can affect what you're doing, the customer facing side of things. That'd be a conversation to have with your certification body. Hopefully it's NQA. Okay. What is essential? Okay, let's go. A couple more bits here. Two more? Okay. What is essential requirements to do internal audit? Well, essential requirements is to basically have someone competent doing them. Second most important thing is to generate a good program, a schedule, whatever you like to call it. Okay, and make sure that schedule is covering your management system, your operations, and then it's being met, and you're replanning that. The essential requirements are embedded within the 9001. Fundamentally, having a good program in place that is considering the importance of the processes, previous results, and so on and so forth. So the idea is you're not just doing an internal audit to tick a box and please an auditor or please a certification body. That's not what it's about at all. Okay, the essential requirements of an internal audit are you take into account the objectives of an internal audit, and they are basically to make sure that your system is there, that it's compliant with the standard, it's being worked to, and it's effective. That's what you're after with an internal audit. Okay. And will you receive a copy of the PowerPoint slides? Yes, you will, after I've corrected a couple of typos, which I noted in there. The observant amongst you may have seen that. Okay, so that was it for the questions and answers as I have them. I'll just give it a couple of seconds in case any more come up. Oh, hang on, no, there's more. Someone said thank you, Susan. You're very welcome. Thank you, Susan. What job title is usually responsible for the design and overall management of the management system? Well, good question. Once upon a time, in the good old days, there used to be a clause that said quality management representative, and it's that there was a particular clause for it. Now it doesn't exist. Basically, there's a clause in the standard 5.3 that's organizational roles, responsibilities, and authorities. Okay, now that doesn't demand that a particular job title, is allocated the responsibilities, but it does say that responsibilities and authorities need to be defined, communicated, and understood. Okay, and that's part of top management's role. Whether or not that falls to one person is entirely up to you as an organization. Quite often than not, it does. I'd say probably 80% of the business I go into, there's a nominated person responsible for this, for their sins. But the idea of taking that particular clause out is it hammers home the idea that quality isn't just down to an individual, it's down to the organization and top management to make sure that quality is defined, the system set up, and assurance is understood and followed through. Okay, so the question, what job title is usually responsible? The answer is there isn't one. I suppose if you want to give it a title, it would be quality management representative or quality manager or QHSE manager or whatever you like, but standard doesn't mandate that. Okay, the idea is that it's a holistic thing within the organization, not down to an individual person. Okay, so there we go. Hopefully that helped. Good. Oh, there's more. No, thank you again. You're very welcome. Okay. So, I mean, look, what I'll do, everyone, I'm going to stay here just for a little while until sort of see people leaving and drifting out the room. I'll keep the question panel open. I'll keep my eyes open for anything that comes through. Failing that, thank you for coming along. We'll be doing some more of these as time goes by, probably enhancing some of the things that we've had questions on, and indeed the subjects internally as well. So, yeah. Stay safe, enjoy your weekends, join us again soon, and any questions will keep my eyes open. But thank you for joining and listening, and I hope that it's been helpful for you. Thanks everyone, take care. Okay, let me see. Regarding further webinars, do you have a schedule of dates, topics in mind? Design topic we're extremely interested. Okay, yeah, okay, Joanna, thank you for that. Yes, design is one that we don't have a schedule as it stands. We'll probably be doing the kind of, just put them out as they come along, but the design one will be something that we will do one on. So yeah, thank you for that. And if you subscribe to the email list, you'll get notification of that. So yeah, we'll keep in touch. Enda, good to see you, Enda. Take care. Simon Cooks, okay, good, no problem yet. Okay.